How does one country, after 17 years of brutal dictatorship, become Latin America's most prosperous democracy, while another, which never had military rule, collapses into authoritarianism? How does Chile, just as dependent on a single commodity as Venezuela, build South America's strongest economy while Venezuela implodes? And how does a nation that keeps voting for left-wing parties avoid the Venezuelan nightmare? Over the next 10 minutes, I'll explain exactly how Chile escaped Venezuela's fate. And the answer will challenge everything you think you know about left and right, markets and socialism, and what truly protects prosperity and freedom. Let's start with the baseline comparison. In 1970, both countries were incredibly similar. Both depended almost entirely on a single natural resource, Venezuela on oil, Chile on copper. For both, about 90% of their export revenue came from that one commodity. They faced the same resource curse, the same political instability, and had powerful leftist movements demanding social justice and redistribution to address significant inequality. But this is where their paths diverged so dramatically. The split begins with the most painful chapter in Chilean history. September 11, 1973. General Augusto Pinochet leads a military coup, overthrowing the democratically elected socialist president, Salvador Allende. What followed was 17 years of authoritarian rule, marked by systematic human rights violations, political repression, and thousands of murdered dissidents. Let me be crystal clear. Pinochet's dictatorship committed atrocities, torture, disappearances, political murders. These are documented historical facts. The regime's human rights record is indefensible. But here's what makes Chile's story so crucial. What Pinochet did economically, despite being in an authoritarian framework, created structural foundations that Venezuela never built. And when Chile returned to democracy in 1990, those economic foundations remained, while democratic institutions were restored and strengthened. This is the paradox that confuses simple analysis. In the mid-70s, with Chile's economy in crisis from hyperinflation under Allende, Pinochet turned to a group of Chilean economists trained at the University of Chicago. Known as the Chicago Boys, they implemented radical free market reforms, privatizing state companies, opening Chile to international trade, protecting property rights, and establishing fiscal discipline. But most critically, they did something Venezuela never did. They built institutions. They created an independent central bank, transparent regulatory agencies, and legal frameworks protecting contracts and property. These institutions were designed to constrain government power, preventing any future leader from seizing total economic control. When democracy returned to Chile in 1990, these institutions stayed. A center-left coalition won the presidency. And here's what didn't happen. They didn't dismantle the economic framework. For the next 30 years, Chile has been governed mainly by center-left and left-wing parties. Socialist presidents, social democratic coalitions, yet Chile didn't become Venezuela. Why? The answer is that Chilean leftist parties learned the difference between social democracy and socialism. They understood the difference between redistributing wealth within a market economy and seizing state control of it. They expanded social programs, yes, but they funded them through economic growth and responsible taxes, not by printing money or expropriating businesses. Let's look at the specific choices. First, copper revenues. Chile, like Venezuela with oil, created a sovereign wealth fund to save money during commodity booms. Venezuela, under Chavez and Maduro, spent every dollar and borrowed against the future. When copper prices fell, Chile used its savings. When oil prices fell, Venezuela printed money, creating hyperinflation. Second, property rights. Chile maintained legal protections for private property, even under leftist governments. Investors felt secure. Venezuela expropriated over 1,400 companies. Investment fled. Third, central bank independence. Chile's central bank controls monetary policy without political interference. Venezuela's became a personal printing press for the president, leading to the worst hyperinflation in the Western Hemisphere. Fourth, trade. Chile signed free trade agreements all over the world, diversifying into wine, fruit, salmon, and services. Venezuela closed its economy, imposed price controls, and destroyed domestic production. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Chilean voters consistently chose left-wing parties, but those parties governed within institutional constraints that prevented them from implementing Venezuelan-style socialism. The independent central bank protected property rights, and international trade agreements tied the hands of future governments, preventing them from making catastrophic decisions. Venezuela had no such mechanisms. When Chavez won in 1999, nothing stopped him from rewriting the constitution, packing the courts, and seizing economic control. But didn't Chile face pressure from radicals? Absolutely. In 2019, massive protests rocked the country, demanding constitutional reform, but Chile responded through its institutions. They held a referendum. A constitutional convention was elected. It drafted a new, very left-leaning constitution. And then, in 2022, Chilean voters rejected it decisively. Why? Because it went too far. It threatened property rights and looked too much like the Venezuelan model that Chileans had watched collapse. They wanted reform. This is the key distinction. Chilean leaders, even socialists like Michelle Bachelet, understood that you can't redistribute wealth you haven't created. She expanded social programs significantly, but didn't expropriate companies or print money. She governed as a social democrat, not a revolutionary. The results are staggering. In 1990, Chile's GDP per capita was around $5,000. Today, it's over $16,000. Poverty dropped from 38% to under 9%. In Venezuela, GDP per capita fell from $6,000 in 1999 to just $1,750 today. Poverty exploded to over 90%. Chile joined the OECD group of developed economies. Venezuela produced the largest refugee crisis in the Western Hemisphere. The lesson transcends the left-right divide. Institutions matter more than ideology. Property rights, independent central banks, rule of law. These aren't right-wing or left-wing ideas. They are foundational requirements for any prosperous, free society. Chilean leftists governed differently because they saw Venezuela's collapse in real time. It was a constant reminder of what not to do. So, what are the lessons? First, build institutions that constrain government power before you need them. Second, understand that social justice and market economics can coexist. Third, credible commitment to stable rules is vital for investment. And fourth, learn from others' mistakes. Today, Chile still faces challenges: inequality, social tension, political polarization. But it has the institutional capacity to address them without destroying itself. Venezuela has lost all of that. In 1970, a Venezuelan earned more than a Chilean. Today, a Chilean earns 15 times more. That gap is explained by institutions, choices, and understanding the difference between reform and revolution. Share this video with anyone who thinks the choice is between unregulated capitalism and socialist revolution. Because Chile proved there's a third path. The alternative to Venezuela isn't dictatorship. It's Chile. Institutions matter. And understanding that is what separates prosperity from poverty and freedom from tyranny.